Hello, welcome to Cryptic Racing League, and we are giving something new a try. I've done a few of these before, running them, but it's an F1 Manager Sim League, and as you can see, the top 10 is currently live, and that is quite a wacky starting grid, to say the least. However, a little explanation of how it works, first of all, while I get the actual lineup up, is you have 10 TPs who are all assigned a team. Unfortunately for us, we had 10, but then one of them dropped out and didn't sign drivers, so we had to assign based off their income remaining. But 10 TPs take a team. They then compete with 75 mil, 50 mil, however much you want to get it, to sign drivers, tech chiefs, sporting directors, head of aeros, and race engineers from the database that you can produce, or just use the game's database. For my case, I've made a database of about 450 drivers, including world champions, IndyCar, NASCAR, so on and so forth, for the people to pick from. However, they then sign them. You then create a team, career mode in F1 Manager, and just assign all those drivers and staff to the team. You create new drivers, new staff. That's why we've got Vettel and that in. And then you create a really bad team of your own and just DNF from every race and let it all unravel. But besides that, here is your starting grid for the Austrian GP. It's Isaac Hadjar in Red Bull alongside Sebastian Vettel in the Haas. Then, right behind him is another Red Bull of Max Verstappen, with Niki Lauda starting in 4th for McLaren. Lewis Hamilton in a Racing Bull starts from 5th as Ayrton Senna in an Aston Martin starts from 6th with Michael Schumacher. 2 7-time world champions assigned to Racing Bulls. He is 7th. Alex Palou, the IndyCar championship contender, thus current, in a Haas with Alain Prost in an Alpine, and Nico Rosberg starting P10 in a Ferrari. Then in 11th is Lando Norris in an Aston Martin, his papaya teammate in real life over in Sauber. He starts 12th. For some reason, the game keeps thinking I'm trying to call him the N-word, rather than me trying to call him Nigel Mansell. That's who's in P13. Charles Leclerc. He's made a jump from Ferrari to from a French-based team of Alpine. Nico Hülkenberg lines up in McLaren in 15th, with Oliver Bearman and Gabriel Bortoleto starting 16th and 17th. Paul Aron is 18th. 19th is George Russell. And last but not least is Andrea Kimi Antonelli. And it does look like a wet race, so let's get into it. And now this is where I do my retire the car jazz, just so then you can actually get the vast majority of a start procedure. And now, anyways, without further ado, it is, wait, let me just make sure I've retired that car. And now it's lights out, and away we go here for FMSL round 1 in CRL. Hadjar leads, but Vettel trying to go around the outsiders. There's already a yellow flag and a complete pile-up in the first corner. Alain Prost and Norris out, and that is a red flag immediately for you lot. I'm so out of it with commentary, but you can see there Lando Norris going around turn 1. Alain Prost goes off in the Alpine, hits the Aston Martin, and it just leads to everyone being piled up behind him. which I'll be honest is not the most ideal way to start this event. So, let's go to the grid for a second attempt at a start procedure. The lights now flicking up one by one again. It's the same top three, but Hamilton up in fourth, and now lights out and away we go for a second time here today. Hadjar leads Verstappen again round the outside of Vettel. This time it does pan out for the Red Bull drivers. Nico Rosberg does get a 5-second penalty for causing a major incident, as he's gone round the outside of Ayrton Senna there for P7, who is now being put under pressure by these two who are going wheel to wheel into turn 4. That's Palau and Piastri, but the Sauber holds on against the IndyCar man, which is a fairly straightforward way to kickstart this event, but for Red Bull in Hyperia form. And that is a 1-2 after the first two laps. The top three split by 3 seconds already, which is not something you tend to see here, but for Red Bull they are just getting on with it and cracking the whip. As Schumacher sits in P6, Mansell's just dropped down to P18 in this race. He is going to the inside against Nico Hülkenberg. Can he get past the German in the McLaren? Yes, he can. And that is P17, whilst the two Williams sit there 15th and 16th of Paul Aron and Andrea Kimi Antonelli, with Leclerc in the sole Alpine leading the two Mercedes. Verstappen just setting fastest lap there. The top two back within a second of each other, but Vettel has crept out of that DRS range. So we will have to bear that in mind as time passes by, as there's another yellow flag. It's Nico Rosberg this time. What's happened there? As you can see, the car pulled up. Rosberg working his way up to turn 3. Goes on brakes, smacks straight into the back of of Michael Schumacher. That is why the Racing Bulls has also plummeted down to P17. Not ideal whatsoever, and Nico Rosberg may also be facing another penalty in the near future. But anyways, besides that, towards lap 6, Verstappen right up behind Isaac Hadjar. The two Red Bulls being let to race as Rosberg has been slammed with another penalty for causing a collision. He is really not enjoying it out here in Austria. He's never had the strongest of form in Austria in general, and it is just prevailing to be the case here today. But Vettel just sitting there watching the two Red Bulls getting so perilously close to scrapping away for P1 in this race up towards turn 1. What can Verstappen do? He looks to the inside against Hadjar, tries to poke his nose in, doesn't get close enough, so he's going to look at it for turn 3 up the hill. Will he brake late to get alongside? Yes, he will, and he will fight it on the exit of the corner. Keep it all going down the hill to turn 4. Verstappen still on the inside against Isaac Hadjar, and that is why Max Verstappen is a 4-time F1 World Champion, ladies and gents. Straight pass down the inside of turn 4 after a bit of a tussle with his teammate. And now it does seem like Isaac Hadjar is being put under pressure by the German of Sebastian Vettel in the Haas. Will we see another change in that top 3 and invert the starting grid as such in this race, as the rain is starting to deteriorate a bit and weaken on track? But Nico Hülkenberg thinking he could try and aim for more than 16th in this race. He did start, if I'm right, P15, but just hasn't had the luxury of being able to work their way through the field so far here today, as it is quite evident Schumacher and Rosberg are carrying their own form of damage. They are closing in on each other, but falling away from the rest of the field. Michael Schumacher 17th, Rosberg 18th. A horrendous way to start this season. But Verstappen again leading Hadjar through turns 7 and 8 up towards turn 9 and 10 to round off the 9th lap and put us a 7th of the race distance down already. And it's Verstappen who leads, the man who started P3 in this race, but then 3 in an imperious charge to a point where Lewis Hamilton 4 seconds behind us. There's another yellow flag. This time it's Oliver Bearman who has gone down. I think, yeah, it was at lockup turn 1. I'll just show you lot that if you really want to see what happened. He's got pressure from Gabriel Bortoleto looking to the inside, and Bearman just straight up goes off and somewhat forgets where his brake pedal is. Besides that, we have now got the Red Bull still going at it. We also have Ayrton Senna versus Niki Lauda, McLaren versus Aston Martin here today, as Isaac Ajar sets your fastest lap of the race of 14.255 for the Frenchman in a Red Bull, but that's been swiftly taken by Andrea Kimi Antonelli of 13.725. It is evident that the track is drying. Will we see one from Nico Rosberg? No, we won't, as he goes through turn 1 whilst these guys are all working their way through the middle and now final sector if you're the top 5, as Hajar really starting to put some pressure on against Max Verstappen round the final corner up to the line. They are going to set another fastest lap, I believe. No, they won't, in fact. It's still Andrea Kimi Antonelli who will hold that luxury in this event. The Williams P12, as things stand, started P20, so it has not been a bad recovery whatsoever. And now he's just going to have to sit and wait, sit and bear what is going to come his way, as Senna has got past Niki Lauda through the 4th corner. But Piastri also being put under some pressure from Alex Palou in the Haas car. Will we see both Haas's up into the top 7, because it is very clear they are no match for the Red Bulls. George Russell in the Ferrari, fastest lap of the session. There is Lauda versus Senna and Piastri versus Palou into turn 3, but the Haas using some battery, some external energy to get away by, but unable to do so. Schumacher, your first to pit today, really proving how difficult it has been for that 7-time world champion hopping in these hybrid era cars, and it's just not gelled for one of the highest stat drivers on this grid. But Bortoleto has just yielded Mercedes' sole point in this event so far to George Russell, who's finished the move off by holding the inside through the third corner and down to turn 4. Bortoleto did try and take it back, unable to do so on the other hand, and he will just keep on patiently waiting for another opportunity to come around, because just like everyone here, they would love to take home a point in this season opener, as it is rather clear those Ferraris do not have the most pace as possible, because George Russell, he's like 92 rated, whereas Bortoleto is about 81 rated, and the Brazilian in the Mercedes able to compete with the Ferrari quite well. Of course, numbers don't determine how good they end up being, as there's another yellow flag. I think that was again Oliver Bearman. Yes, it was, and this time it's a spin in turn 4. Just straight up drops it, getting on the throttle and gets straight back going. It was a very puny mistake, a fairly silly one, caused by a lapse of concentration. And he will just be kicking himself. But who may be kicking themselves in a moment is Nigel Mansell, a man who started 13th, dropped down to 18th, and has manoeuvred his way back up to 13th in this race. A net of 0 places, being put under pressure by the Estonian of Paul Aron in the Williams. Paul Aron about 7 tenths quicker than Andrea Kimi Antonelli in qualifying, and currently having to try and show to the team that he is just as good as the Italian, who has managed to get past him quite quickly in this race, as Paul Aaron round the outside of Nigel Mansell down the hill towards turn 4, and that should be the move done for the Williams, but Mansell, braver and later on the brakes, able to put that Sauber back ahead of the Williams car, which is a lovely sight to see for them as they now progress to turn 9 and 10 in this race. Paul Aaron not finding a way to get past the F1 and IndyCar world champion of 92 and 93, two different series, one year after the other, as now, just like that, two different eras of drivers, one after the other, and swapping around a bit. 13th and 14th, just going back and forth like a yo-yo. However, Nico Hülkenberg is right there, gleaming through the helmet. Gets a lovely view of the competition as it's about to be in an iffy position where drivers may consider the dry tyres. It says it's a damp track and 1.09mm of downpour, but besides that, we have got a rather streamlined race to go, as fastest lap does get handed to Lewis Hamilton, who did manage to find a way past Ayrton Senna, and George Russell swiftly taking that away. He's behind Palou and Piastri, the two P's being quite plosive in their battle for 7th. That, however, has eased down over the last few laps, and now George Russell in the Ferrari starting to creep into frame. He's had a brilliant event thus far. It's been near enough flawless for the Ferrari drivers. You can now see their tyre wear. Hamilton fastest lap in 11.1. Will we see anyone else take that in this race? I don't think so for the time being, as the downpour is getting heavier once again, and we can see the gap for George Russell increasing once more. Into the pit lane goes Nico Rosberg. He thinks it's the best time for him to get off of those intermediate tyres, and I think for most people here it would be an ideal time as Schumacher back out ahead of Rosberg. But now for Nico Rosberg, he is going to come out just behind Charles Leclerc, maybe even Bortoletto, who's in P10. So, your first driver lapped this season, and it's the German of Nico Rosberg. Such a shame for the one-time drivers' champion back in 2016. It really has not fared his way today. Has not been able to weather the Austrian storm. And now in P18, and about to be a lap down to the whole pecking order on just lap 23. Bear in mind, we did have a red flag in this race. But Niki Lauda versus Ayrton Senna, 5th versus 6th. Good points for Aston Martin and McLaren on the cards here today. For Aston, of course, Lando Norris started P11 and got caught up in the conundrum with Alan Prost on lap 1, which saw him have an end to both of their races. And for Niki Lauda, he's got Nico Hülkenberg alongside him, but unable to get past the Estonian of Paul Aaron, who is sitting in 14th at the moment. So these are the points they will most definitely be competing for here today. As again, like I said prior, there's not really been much of an answer to the Red Bull. However, we may have just found one. Lewis Hamilton in P2. He found a way past Isaac Hadjar a few laps ago, as they've just lapped Michael Schumacher in this race. Lewis Hamilton lapping Michael Schumacher as his teammate is a sentence I would not think I'd be saying when I woke up this morning, but it is also proving to us that that Racing Bulls man is definitely poised to try and win this title. I know it's only round 1 of 16. There's so long to go. But that just shows we never know what is around the corner. And for Lewis Hamilton, it could be a Simulation League title for Racing Bulls that he clinches onto. That, though, is if the Racing Bulls team can work around something and put them closer to the Red Bull guys, because they've just been untouchable for the most part of today. They have led since the light sequence, well, since both of the light sequences, and no one's actually taken the race lead apart from them. As you can just tell, Isaac Hadjar still poised behind Lewis Hamilton, not really dropping off too much, whereas Sebastian Vettel, who was nice and tucked in with them at the start of this race, 5 seconds near enough down the road from Lewis Hamilton, who is in P2. As I do wonder whether or not we will see 2 Red Bulls or 1 Red Bull on the podium come the end of today's event. And for those querying whether or not we will have more events this week, you have got some planned tomorrow, Friday, not Friday, tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday. However, the time tomorrow is dependent on when I'm in PSGL's commentary box, as it'll either be a 8:30 or it'll either be a 7 o'clock for this. But for Isaac Hadjar, what I know for sure is he is not giving up that easily. For track position, he glanced to the inside there, just didn't manage to do it. However, who is going to try and down the inside is Russell, barges Pelot out of the way. No remorse for the Brit in the Ferrari, as he is now up into P8 and set free to try and hunt down Oscar Piastri, who is about 5 seconds down the road. But before that, they are going to be lapping Michael Schumacher in the Racing Bulls, who is carrying rather significant damage so far here today, as it's not frequent you see cars getting lapped when everyone's on equal performance. But it's just really not gone their way. You can't even say there's anything about us rigging the performance of the Racing Bulls, because one of them has caught right up to Max Verstappen and is possibly going to try and change the script a bit, take a lead in this race. We have not seen that happen so far. We are waiting to see it happen, as Pelot in the Haas in the pits. He's the 3rd man to take a stop today, and I do think he may be trying to trigger an undercut, get him back on par with George Russell and Oscar Piastri in their fights for 7th. If it goes so well, could we maybe even see both Haas's slot into the top 6 here in Austria, as we get AI viewer links practically everywhere we go, and I'll be straight up, I'm not bothered by them, as Lewis Hamilton just out of a second as there's a yellow flag. It's Oliver Behrman once more, another spin for him, this time turn 7, as the Mercedes goes straight off, gives the barrier a little bit of a peck on the cheek as well. But he is now back underway, and I'm pretty sure Behrman, not pitting, is getting quite close to going a lap down against Verstappen, who has started to put the foot to the floor and now has a 2.5 second advantage over Lewis Hamilton. George Russell has decided to undercut Piastri and react to Alex Palou, who's pitted. Paul Aaron also in the pit, seeing whether or not he can try and disturb that fight for what is P9 with Bortoletto, Antonelli and Mansell. Palou, however, unable to get back past George Russell. The weather has not been on his side thus much, as Isaac Hadjar into the pit, seeing whether or not he can get that Red Bull back up into the top two of this race. Intermediates going on for him, as that's a fairly high exposure image, quite different to the gloomy skies in which we have around Austria's Hadjar, managing to just about come out ahead of the group of traffic behind him. And now a question to possibly pose is whether or not the one-stop's on the cards, because you do have the likes of Ayrton Senna or Lewis Hamilton, who's only got 59-60% tyre wear, and there's so long left to run in this race. There's about half the race. They could comfortably make it to the end if they desired. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not they take a stop. Yellow flag out on track. Can't tell who it's for. It's a crash for multiple cars. As we're going to see this, it's Nico Hülkenberg versus Alex Palou. Palou on the inside, making contact with Hülkenberg on the exit, and gets ahead, arguably by forcing a drive off the track. Does Palou get penalised? Yes, he will. It will say it's for causing collision, but in reality it's forcing another drive off track and gaining a place, as Hadjar not being able to pull away from the Alpine of Charles Leclerc is a bit discomforting for Red Bull fans who may be watching, as the Frenchman has to try and bear with the P7, which they have. Of course, they've pitted, whereas everyone else ahead of them and in the top 10 is yet to do so. Talking about pitting, Sebastian Vettel in the pit lane, as there's a yellow flag for Hülkenberg, who's had a lock-up, and out the pits comes Sebastian Vettel, quite swift, but it may all go wrong as he manages to just about get ahead of Gabriel Bortoletto, who's in P9, but behind Charles Leclerc, so he knows that there is going to be work to do as Verstappen and Hamilton both into the pits. Is Hadjar going to jump any of him? Is my question. They're working their way around the final corner now. Verstappen out the pits, Hamilton out the pits, as there is Isaac Hadjar just in the rear view mirror of the Racing Bulls. The Red Bull to the outside for turn 3. Will he be able to manifest P5 in this race? No, he won't. Hamilton manages to effortlessly fend off the inside and stops the Red Bull from gaining a place. As I do think it's been a fairly cyclical narrative in terms of what's happened. Hadjar, however, trying with those slightly more I am sorry about that, but I'm back now. As you can see, Verstappen's pitted. He came out just behind Ayrton Senna and Lauda in P3. The McLaren and Aston Martin still going on for strong points, but Hulkenberg and Behrman both now lapped in this race, and there's 30 odd seconds to Paul Aaron in the Williams. Talking about Williams, Andrea Kimi Antonelli into the pit lane. We are going to see a bit more of the pit stop bonanza going on here today. However, question marks still do loom over what is going to happen with Ayrton Senna. He's not even hit 50% tyre wear, and he is still on only lap 42 of 71. Make it 43 now, as Verstappen just managed to barge his way straight by. Hamilton also barging their way past Lauda in the first corner, as Nico Hulkenberg, I think, is actually doing quite well at keeping up with Verstappen. Definitely setting the pace, as Schumacher behind Nico Rosberg. The two had a clash which has seen them in unexpected places, but hoping that it's all going to be brushed over for the next race, which is Silverstone. Sorry, I was yawning. But yeah, Ayrton Senna now into the pit lane. That is everyone in those top 10 or so to pit. And as you can tell, Nigel Mansell rather enjoying this race. He's yet to pit. Bortoleto and Piastri, the only other cars not to, as there's a yellow flag. It's for an Alpine, and that's Charles Leclerc, who's locked up in turn 1. A rather streamlined incident, nothing too over-exaggerative, but for the Alpine, lower chances of bringing home points in the season opener. Does look like they won't be the only team though. Williams also playing similar cards today. They've just had such a poor weekend. No cars crept into top 10 throughout practice. And then qualifying, they both went out in that first session. And now they are left to their own devices, still somehow not lapped in this race. Instead, you've got Hulkenberg, Behrman, Rosberg and Schumacher, who are a lap down so far, as Nigel Mansell trying to fight himself through against Palou and Lauda. Palou looking to the outside there for a brief moment, going around turn 8. This is, of course, for 10th place here today. Palou to the inside against Nigel Mansell. The Haas up to P10 with little effort, to say the least. And Nigel Mansell now P11. Quite frankly, he is just going to walk himself down and down the pecking order. Not too much to do in this race, as Vettel has managed to find a way past Isaac Hadjar. The Haas driver starting to pose a threat in this race once more. They're 8 seconds off, the two of them, from Max Verstappen, who is still leading. He's got a 2.7 second lead over Hamilton, and apart from Ayrton Senna, he is the only driver to have led today, outside, well, as well as Hadjar. It's the two Red Bulls and Senna as your sole race leaders. in this event. And to say the least, I have seen much more interesting F1 simulations than this, because the Red Bulls are imperious. Nothing seems like that can stop them. Whatever move they've made, they've just been beaten. Or not beaten, unbeatable. Because whatever anyone else does, they just match it and go beyond. Bortoletto into the pits, that promotes Alex Palou to P9 as Loudon Senna sitting 7th and 8th, whilst George Russell going for a move against Oscar Piastri. Bortoletto having a pit stop issue. We are in for a race of chaos outside of the finite lead swaps, as it's just the front right that doesn't get on. The Jackman is unable to do it. And that is why Bortoletto has had to suffer a bit longer in the pit lane, coming out P14, yellow flag, and that is Isaac Hadjar, who's had a spin in turn 7. That is not what I thought was coming in. As you can just see, got on the slightly damper curb than the track, and it sent the Red Bull round. You can even see there the team being in absolute shock at it all happening, but now George Russell able to put the pressure on against the young Frenchman. 3.25 millimeters of rain on track, as Senna, being a rain maestro that he is, up to P6 quite nicely. Piastri so close to tapping the rear end of that Aston, could have sent it spinning, but Senna rather fixated on trying to get himself back into this race. Charles Leclerc having another lock-up as Hadjar now overtaken by George Russell, with the top 3 practically locked in for this event. Verstappen, Hamilton, Vettel. Question will be who is where, because over the last 3 laps Vettel has taken a slight margin out on Verstappen and Hamilton, persistently setting similar, if not a wee bit quicker laps than Verstappen. I mean like a 10th a lap of them both against the Dutchman. But Paul Aron, the Estonian, fighting the Australian of Oscar Piastri, who manages to get straight by on those new tyres. As there's a yellow flag, it is Gabriel Bortoletto. No, it's not. It's Oliver Behrman, who's had a crash in turn 1. We're about to see it just drop the rear end again and gives the wall a love tap for good measure. As Paul Aron straight up locking up in the first corner. That gave Nigel Mansell P11 in this race, as the leaders just been so uncomparable in this race. They are on a roll and seem destined to maybe put a lap on the likes of Paul Aron, Leclerc and Bortoletto before it all comes to an end. As you can see Leclerc now in the helmet trying to get past Paul Aron. You can even get that lovely rearview mirror of the Mercedes of Gabriel Bortoletto, just showing how he's kind of stuck in the middle of it all. As I'm curious what other PVs, yeah, nothing too interesting. You will primarily be seeing this throughout the season as your basic. As Leclerc right behind Paul Aron. I think the Alpine has to do something about it, because points has near enough slipped away to a point where Mercedes and Alpine are going to be the 2 teams that leave without a point today, because Antonelli's sitting P9 and he's got a buffer
Piastri's in P10 with his teammate right behind. So if Piastri loses a place, it's most likely his teammate who picks it up. Then Leclerc's just been stuck behind anything that came his way. The Alpine car not really being a racy car whatsoever, a lot more competitive in qualifying, as seen with Alan Prost's efforts, putting them up into that top 10 shootout. As another yellow flag's out, this time it's Ayrton Senna, who's had a moment, crash involving multiple cars. We're about to have a look. He sees that Kadra tucked up right behind the Aston Martin. He goes to the inside, brakes and just goes straight into the back of the Aston Martin. It's such a shame. Hadjar, the pole sitter, folding and fading away in this race. They've even been overtaken by Piastri. Hadjar has got back underway, but Nigel Mansell barging his way past down the inside, and Senna carrying damage, making it quite impossible for him to grab a point between now and the end of the race. Hadjar, 5-second penalty. That's going to put him out of the points as things stand, and it would demote him to P11, which does give Williams double points in the season opener. As I will be straight up, this has been one wacky race, as everything really has gone down. You've got 2 cars out with a red flag on lap 1, Schumacher and Rosberg crashing, Senna and Hadjar crashing, Behrman going on thousands of spins and trips around the circuit, Alex Palou and Hadjar grabbing penalties for collisions. So did Rosberg. Rosberg in fact grabbed 2. And now Williams, who started like 18th and last, now running 7th and 11th, as Aaron having to try and pick up the pace over the next lap or so. Otherwise, a double points finish for Williams may become impossible, as Hadjar should be able to just about hold on. But Bortoletto to the inside, and that's stolen the place from the Williams. Charles Leclerc also knows that he can gain a place on Isaac Hadjar here. So if he gets to the front of that queue, he just has to stay within 5 seconds of the Frenchman in the Red Bull to take a point for Alpine. It's been a very difficult weekend for their team, but a point would be magnificent for them. However, same said about the Mercedes team. Just like Williams, they weren't anticipated to do too well in this simulation just due to their lack of experience in drivers. They're the only teams that have not featured some form of icon or driver ranked in the top 25 for driver ratings in this save, which does just immediately put them on the back foot. Also, if you look at the average team rating, Mercedes is about 2 whole ratings lower than Williams, who's only 9th in that table. But Schumacher 2 laps down in this race. Nico Rosberg will be the next victim to go 2 laps down. As you can see, Gabriel Bortoletto 3.1 from Isaac Hadjar with 10 laps to go. Charles Leclerc versus Paul Aron. Leclerc around the outside of the Williams, and that is P12, as Paul Aron seems like he's got some form of issue, just fading and fading down the order. It is not working out for him whatsoever, as Leclerc can be set free to hunt down his rival on track of Gabriel Bortoletto for P10 or P11 on track, if you want to be so precise. now pulled out behind Charles Leclerc still, but Ayrton Senna right up his gearbox. The Williams team just showing that they are not as strong as people make out to believe. I do think though Isaac Hadjar is holding some form of damage, because the rate of NOS in which Bortoletto's flown up to the back of him, it's rather sublime. 1.8 seconds being gained in the last few laps for Bortoletto. I mean 2 laps and he's gaining about 2 seconds across them. A second a lap, give or take a few attempts. He's had some insane pace, but now, oh, I've said it, he starts to drop back. Alex Palou, fastest lap of the race. He's also got 5 seconds to bear with. Would drop him to P8 come the end of today. But you never know. Oscar Piastri and Andrea Kimi Antonelli could really start fighting in this race and send them further down the order. But I can tell just by the look of this, Red Bull are not happy with what they've been dealt. Today it was a 1-3 on the grid. They led start to finish, apart from that vague period where Senna led. And now Hadjar looks like he's going to go home pointless from pole position. And Verstappen looks like he's going to be their sole scorer, which will not faze them whatsoever, because the points Haas are scoring, it's not going to be enough to finish ahead of Red Bull, so they can go home with that saving grace. As Johnny Carr has asked the Red Bull TP, what's happened to Hadjar? So I'm going to sit up so I can explain. As what happened was Hadjar started pole, he then dropped to second, third, fourth, and that wasn't an issue. Then he had Senna pull out a slight overcut, came out right behind him. Senna got ahead. Hadjar tried overtaking the next corner, went deep on the brakes, hit Senna, sent them both off, hence why the Aston Martin down in P14 and Hadjar in P10 with a penalty, because the Red Bull did go bolting straight into the back end of the Aston Martin. For context, on lap 1 what happened, it was just a straight up pile up. Prost went wide, hit Norris, they both crashed out, and then everyone else stacked up behind him, as there's Bortoletto going wheel to wheel with the Red Bull, and that asserts the Mercedes with points here today. Of course, 3 laps, and there's not much time to take that away. However, just to have a look at how strong of a race it has been for Verstappen, at least he did get pole, yeah. But for Verstappen, it's been such a strong race. He is on track with the way things are going to possibly lap his own teammate Charles Leclerc 5 seconds down the road. You can see that Red Bull in the rear view of Charles. And then by the time that's done, will there be time? There's only a lap though. That's Leclerc yielding the place and confirms what we were fearing. But Russell versus Lauda around the outside for turn 6, then turn 7 and 8, and it's George Russell who will take P4. Lewis Hamilton sets the fastest lap of the race. It's a bit too late to be trying to hunt down Verstappen, because there's only 1 lap to do it. However, round 1, it's not won by a landslide, only a mere 4 seconds, but the gaps up and down the field being rather large, regarding that this is just round 1. But Verstappen does take the win here in Austria. Lewis Hamilton second, with Vettel coming over the line for P3, George Russell 4th, Niki Lauda in 5th, with Oscar Piastri coming through turn 9 and 10 for P6. Alex Palou, P7 on track, P9 post-race with Antonelli and Mansell getting a promotion, with Gabriel Bortoleto finishing the points in one hectic season opener. Yeah, full rundown of the finishing order. Ignore the face cards, I didn't have any to import because I'm on PS. But it was Verstappen who won, followed by Lewis Hamilton. Then it's Sebastian Vettel, George Russell, Niki Lauda, Oscar Piastri, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, Nigel Mansell, Alex Palou, Gabriel Bortoleto, Isaac Hadjar, Charles Leclerc, Paul Aaron, Ayrton Senna, Nico Hulkenberg, Oliver Behrman, Nico Rosberg, Michael Schumacher as the last of your finishers. Then it was Alan Prost and Lando Norris, both out of the race, the only drivers to DNF. And that was a lap 1 incident. That's of course your drivers. I believe Pole don't get a point. Yeah, no point for Pole. And your constructors, it's Red Bull who leads on 25 points, followed by Racing Bulls on 19, Haas on 17, Ferrari 12, Sauber 12, McLaren 10, Williams 6, and Mercedes a sole point to take home to their piggy bank. However, I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I'll see you probably tomorrow for round 2. Goodbye.